What? Are you sure?
Ma'am, we need to go.
The crowd is getting agitated. Okay, let's move.
Clear the way! Coming through!
Stay with us, ma'am. Yes, the situation is contained. We're briefing now.
Ma'am, we need to move.
Understood, thank you.
The crowd is getting restless.
Okay, we're going up. Stay close.
Yes, ma'am. Let's move.
A heavy steel door marked "Authorized Personnel Only" stood just 20 feet away. Yet the distance felt like miles. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, but the real danger was standing right on the cracked pavement of the courthouse parking lot. Two patrol officers, hands resting casually on their holstered weapons, blocked the path of a woman who held the fate of thousands in her hands every single day. She was not a trespasser. She was the highest-ranking official in the building. What followed was a brutal, astonishing display of arrogance that cost two men their badges, their pensions, and their freedom. The bitter wind whipping off the Scioto River in downtown Columbus, Ohio, carried the distinct, biting chill of a frosty autumn morning. The sprawling concrete plaza of the Franklin County Courthouse was practically deserted. The sky was still a bruised pre-dawn purple, casting long, imposing shadows across the brutalist architecture of the legal complex. Judge Naomi Whitaker navigated her dark blue Lexus sedan into the rear alleyway that led to the restricted surface lot. At 58 years old, Naomi had spent over 2 decades navigating the treacherous, male-dominated waters of the state's criminal justice system. She had started as a relentless assistant district attorney, clawing her way up the ranks through sheer brilliance and an unyielding work ethic, eventually earning her seat on the Superior Court bench. She was known among defense attorneys and prosecutors alike as a jurist of uncompromising fairness and formidable intellect. She did not suffer fools, and she possessed a terrifyingly encyclopedic knowledge of the Ohio Revised Code. Normally, Naomi parked in the subterranean VIP garage, swiping her secure badge to glide past the reinforced gates. But this morning, a power failure in the lower levels had forced the courthouse security team to redirect the judges to the secured, fenced-in surface lot. Naomi parked her car, killed the engine, and took a deep breath. It was going to be a grueling day. She was presiding over a high-profile racketeering trial involving a local organized crime syndicate, and the media circus had already begun to pitch its tents on the front lawn of the courthouse. She stepped out of the Lexus, wrapping her tailored charcoal gray trench coat tighter around her shoulders against the biting wind. In her right hand, she gripped a heavy, scuffed leather briefcase containing hundreds of pages of confidential case files. She locked her car and began the short walk toward the heavy steel door reserved strictly for judges and senior administrative staff. She was roughly 30 feet from the entrance when the harsh, blinding beam of a police spotlight hit her square in the back, illuminating her like a deer in the headlights. "Hey, you, stop right there!" a voice barked over a cruiser's external PA system. Naomi paused. She blinked against the glaring light, turning slowly to face the source. A black and white Columbus Police Department cruiser had jumped the curb of the alleyway, its tires screeching slightly as it angled to block the pedestrian path. The vehicle's red and blue light bar remained off, but the blinding halogen spotlight was pinned directly on her face, making it impossible to see the men inside. The heavy doors of the cruiser opened with a synchronized thud. 2 officers stepped out into the frigid air. Officer Bryce Hargrove was a 12-year veteran of the force. Broad-shouldered, thick-necked, and possessing a permanent scowl, Hargrove had a reputation in his precinct as a bully, a man who had been passed over for a sergeant's promotion 3 times and carried the resulting chip on his shoulder like a badge of honor. His partner, Officer Ryan Brooks, was a rookie, barely 6 months out of the academy. Nervous, eager to please his veteran training officer, and disastrously inexperienced, Brooks kept his hand hovering nervously near his duty belt. "I said stay put," Hargrove commanded, his boots crunching loudly on the frosted asphalt as he closed the distance. "Keep your hands where I can see them." Naomi stood perfectly still, her posture entirely relaxed, projecting the same icy calm she used to control chaotic courtrooms. "Good morning, officers," she said, her voice resonant and steady, easily cutting through the wind. "Can I help you?" Hargrove stopped about 10 feet away, sizing her up. He saw a black woman in a trench coat standing in a restricted area of the courthouse before dawn. Despite the obvious quality of her clothing and the expensive leather of her briefcase, his preconditioned biases immediately categorized her as a threat, or at the very least, someone who did not belong. "What are you doing back here?" Hargrove demanded, resting his right hand on his radio, his left thumb tucked into his duty belt. "This is a restricted access lot, city personnel only." "I am well aware of the parking restrictions, officer," Naomi replied, her tone polite but firm. "I work here. I am heading inside to my chambers." Hargrove let out a short, cynical bark of laughter. He turned his head slightly to glance at Brooks, who had taken up a flanking position to the right. "You hear that, Ryan? She works here in her chambers." Hargrove turned his attention back to Naomi, his expression hardening into a sneer. "Listen, lady, the janitorial entrance is around the front on the east side, and their shift does not start until later, so I will ask you one more time. What are you doing creeping around the judge's lot?" Naomi felt a familiar, cold spike of anger in her chest, but she did not let it reach her face. She had spent her entire life dealing with men like Hargrove, men who looked at her and saw only their own limitations and prejudices reflected back at them. I am not a member of the custodial staff, Naomi stated, her words enunciated with razor-sharp precision. My name is Naomi Whitaker. I'm a Superior Court judge for Franklin County. Now, if you will excuse me, I have a very busy docket this morning and I need to get inside. She turned back toward the heavy steel door and took a single step. I did not say you were dismissed, Hargrove roared, his temper flaring instantly at the perceived disrespect. In 3 quick strides, he closed the gap between them. Before Naomi could react, Hargrove grabbed her roughly by the left shoulder of her trench coat, yanking her backward with enough force to make her stumble. The heavy leather briefcase slipped from her grasp, hitting the pavement with a loud smack. Case files and legal briefs spilled out onto the frosty ground. Do not touch me, Naomi said, her voice dropping an octave, radiating a sudden intense authority that caused the rookie, Brooks, to visibly flinch. She locked eyes with Hargrove, her gaze piercing. Remove your hand from my coat immediately. Hargrove's face flushed a mottled, angry red. He was not used to being spoken to with such absolute defiance, especially not by someone he had already mentally diminished. You are trespassing on restricted city property, you are defying a lawful order, and you are resisting an officer, Hargrove spat, his grip tightening on her shoulder. Brooks, get her against the car. The situation deteriorated with terrifying speed. Officer Brooks rushed forward, his youthful face pale and tight with anxiety. Following his training officer's command, he grabbed Naomi's right arm. Together, the 2 grown men forced the 58-year-old woman toward the hood of their police cruiser. This is an unlawful detainment, Naomi warned, her voice devoid of panic but laced with absolute chilling certainty. You have no probable cause, no reasonable articulable suspicion of a crime, and you are violating my Fourth Amendment rights. I strongly advise you to stop and ask for my identification. Shut your mouth, Hargrove barked, slamming her roughly against the cold steel of the cruiser's hood. The impact knocked the wind out of her briefly, jarring her ribs. You do not tell me how to do my job, lady. You want to play lawyer? You can do it from a holding cell. Mr. Reginald Thorpe, an elderly groundskeeper arriving early for his shift, emerged from a nearby side alley pushing a salt spreader. He froze, his eyes widening in absolute horror as he watched 2 Columbus police officers roughing up Judge Naomi Whitaker, a woman who had always made it a point to greet him by name every single morning. Mr. Reginald Thorpe opened his mouth to shout, to tell them who they were assaulting, but Hargrove shot him a lethal glare over his shoulder. Keep walking, pal. Official police business, Hargrove yelled. Mr. Reginald Thorpe, terrified of losing his pension or catching a charge himself, quickly backed into the shadows, though he pulled out his cell phone to record from the safety of the brick alcove. Spread your legs, Hargrove ordered Naomi, kicking the inside of her ankle roughly with the toe of his heavy boot to force her stance wider. Naomi complied, her mind racing, cataloging every single procedural violation, every physical assault, every breach of department protocol, failure to de-escalate, unlawful use of force, false imprisonment, assault under the color of authority. The charges were stacking up in her mind like bricks in a wall. She felt the humiliating pat-down of Hargrove's hands running down the sides of her coat, searching for weapons. "Where is your ID?" Brooks asked, his voice shaking slightly. The rookie was beginning to realize that the woman they had pinned against the car did not sound, act, or carry herself like a vagrant or a trespasser. Her vocabulary, her total lack of fear, and her chilling calmness were entirely anomalous. "My state-issued judicial identification card is in my wallet," Naomi replied, her cheek pressed against the freezing metal of the cruiser's hood. "My wallet is in the interior left breast pocket of my trench coat, the one your partner is currently trying to rip off my shoulders." Hargrove scoffed. He reached clumsily into her interior pocket, pulling out a sleek oxblood leather wallet. He flipped it open. Inside was her Ohio driver's license, a few credit cards, and prominently displayed behind a clear plastic window, her gold Superior Court judge's badge and secure proximity ID card. Hargrove stared at it for a long, agonizing moment. The ambient light from the street lamps illuminated the gold seal of the state of Ohio. It illuminated the words, Judge Naomi Whitaker. For a fraction of a second, doubt flickered in Hargrove's eyes, but the toxic cocktail of his own arrogance, his stubborn refusal to be proven wrong, and his deep-seated prejudices overrode his common sense. He had already gone too far. If he backed down now and admitted he had assaulted a sitting judge, his career was over anyway. His mind desperately scrambled for an out, a rationalization to save his own skin. "Fake!" Hargrove declared loudly, snapping the wallet shut and tossing it onto the windshield of the cruiser. Brooks stared at him, aghast. "Bryce, that looked real. The hologram?" "I said it's a fake, Ryan," Hargrove snapped, his voice shrill with defensive panic. "Anybody can buy a prop badge online. These sovereign citizen types do it all the time. She has a stolen identity, and she's trying to infiltrate a secured judicial building. That makes her a high-level security threat." "Officer Hargrove," Naomi said calmly, reading the nameplate on his chest, "you are engaging in willful ignorance to cover up an assault. I am Judge Naomi Whitaker. If you run my name through leads, or if you simply look at the license plate of the Lexus parked 10 feet away, you will see that it is registered to me at an unlisted address reserved for judicial officers. You are destroying your life right now. I am giving you one final opportunity to remove your hands from me." Instead of backing down, Hargrove was entirely consumed by the perceived challenge to his authority. He unclipped the heavy metal handcuffs from his belt. Hands behind your back, Hargrove growled. Naomi did not resist. She knew the law. Resisting an unlawful arrest physically on the street was a battle you always lost. The courtroom was where you won the war. She brought her wrists behind her back. Click, click. The ratcheting sound of the heavy steel cuffs closing around her wrists echoed loudly in the quiet, frozen morning air. Hargrove squeezed the cuffs tightly, a punitive measure known as giving them the bracelets, ensuring the metal bit sharply into Naomi's skin, pinching the nerves in her wrists. You have the right to remain silent, Hargrove began to recite, a triumphant smirk returning to his face as he turned her around to face him. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Naomi stared dead into his eyes, her expression as unreadable and hard as granite. She did not blink. She let him finish the entire Miranda warning, standing there in the cold, handcuffed outside the very building where she was supposed to preside over a major trial later that morning. Do you understand these rights as I have read them to you? Hargrove finished, breathing heavily, clearly enjoying the power trip. I understand them far better than you do, officer, Naomi replied evenly. Now put me in the back of your vehicle. The interior of Squad Car 42 smelled overwhelmingly of cheap pine air freshener, stale sweat, and spilled black coffee. Naomi was shoved roughly into the cramped rear seat, the hard plastic molding digging painfully into her back. Her arms, bound tightly behind her, ached with a dull, throbbing intensity, but she forced herself to sit upright, maintaining her dignity. Hargrove and Brooks slid into the front seats, the thick plexiglass partition separating them from their prisoner. Run her plates, Hargrove commanded, pointing at the dark blue Lexus sitting in the lot. Let's get this sovereign citizen nut job processed. Trespassing, resisting arrest, falsifying official identification. The DA is going to love this. Brooks, looking visibly nauseous and sweating despite the freezing weather, turned to the mobile data terminal mounted between the seats. His fingers trembled as he typed in the license plate number of the Lexus. He hit enter. The screen loaded for a second, then it flashed bright red. Restricted record, judicial privilege, level 1 clearance required, contact dispatch for override. Brooks swallowed hard. The silence in the front seat was deafening. He slowly turned his head to look at Hargrove, whose eyes were fixed on the glowing red screen. Bryce, Brooks whispered, his voice cracking, it is a restricted plate. Only high-ranking government officials and judges get those blocks in the system. Bryce, I think she is telling the truth. Hargrove's jaw tightened until the muscles threatened to snap. The reality of the situation was beginning to batter against the thick walls of his ego, but he was in too deep. Admitting fault now meant admitting to false arrest, battery, and civil rights violations. He needed her to be a fraud. He needed it. It is a glitch, Hargrove lied, his voice sounding hollow even to himself. Or she hacked the DMV registry. Call dispatch. Tell them we have a Jane Doe refusing to identify properly. From the back seat, Naomi leaned forward slightly, her voice penetrating the small gaps in the plexiglass divider. Under Section 2935.20 of the Ohio Revised Code, a person arrested or detained has the right to communicate with an attorney or another person of their choice immediately upon being detained, Naomi stated, her voice echoing with the exact cadence she used when delivering a verdict. I am demanding my right to make one phone call. Now, if you deny me this, you are committing yet another actionable offense. Hargrove whipped around to glare through the partition. He wanted to break her. He wanted to see her cry, to beg, to admit she was a nobody. If he let her make a call and she called a random crazy relative, it would prove his point. It would validate his actions. Fine, Hargrove snarled. You want to make a call? Let us make a call. Who do you want to call, Your Honor? The President? The Pope? I would like to call Victor Lang, Naomi replied smoothly. Brooks dropped his hands from the keyboard. He looked like he was about to vomit. Victor Lang was the chief of police for the city of Columbus. He was the man who signed their paychecks, approved their leave, and possessed the absolute authority to strip them of their badges. You are full of it, Hargrove scoffed, though a bead of cold sweat finally broke out on his forehead. You do not know the chief. My cell phone is in the right pocket of my trench coat. Pass it back here. Dial the number in my favorites listed under Vic and put it on speakerphone, Naomi instructed. She spoke not as a prisoner, but as a commanding officer giving an absolute directive to a subordinate. Driven by a morbid, self-destructive curiosity and a desperate hope that she was bluffing, Hargrove got out of the car, opened the rear door, and fished the smartphone out of her pocket. The screen required facial recognition. He held it up to Naomi's face. The phone unlocked instantly. Hargrove navigated to the contacts. His thumb hovered over the name Vic, Chief Lang. Besides the name was a photo of Naomi and Chief Lang standing together at a charity gala, both smiling, holding champagne flutes. Hargrove's stomach dropped into a bottomless abyss. The photo was real. The contact was real. His hand was shaking so badly he nearly dropped the phone. He pressed the call button, activated the speakerphone, and tossed the device onto the back seat next to Naomi before retreating to the front seat and slamming the door. The phone rang out through the speakers of the squad car. Ring, ring. Every second felt like an hour to Officer Brooks, who had buried his face in his hands. Click. Naomi? A deep, gravelly voice answered. The voice was instantly recognizable to any cop in Columbus. It was Chief Lang. He sounded groggy but alert. It is early. Is everything all right with the RICO trial? Good morning, Victor, Naomi said, projecting her voice toward the phone beside her. I apologize for waking you. I am afraid there has been a slight complication regarding my arrival at the courthouse this morning. What is wrong? Lang's voice shifted instantly from casual to sharp and authoritative. Security threat? Do I need to send a tactical team to your location? No, Victor, that will not be necessary, Naomi replied, her eyes locked onto the back of Hargrove's head through the plexiglass. I am currently handcuffed in the back of squad car 42, parked in the restricted rear lot of the Franklin County Courthouse. There was absolute silence on the line. For 5 agonizing seconds, the only sound in the cruiser was the rough, panicked breathing of Officer Hargrove. When Chief Lang finally spoke again, the sheer unadulterated fury in his voice caused the windows of the cruiser to seemingly rattle. You are what? I was assaulted, forcefully detained, illegally searched, and handcuffed by Officer Bryce Hargrove and Officer Ryan Brooks, Naomi stated methodically, ensuring the recording system of the cruiser captured every single word. Officer Hargrove threw my case files onto the wet pavement and explicitly ignored my judicial identification, claiming it was fraudulent. Mother of God, Lang whispered. The sound of him throwing off his bed sheets and grabbing his keys was audible through the speaker. Naomi Judge Whitaker, I am so profoundly sorry. Are you injured? My wrists are bruised and my shoulder is strained, but I do not require immediate medical attention, Naomi said. However, I require these handcuffs removed and I require these men dealt with. Officer Hargrove! Lang's voice roared through the small speaker so loud it clipped the phone's audio. Are you listening to this, you absolute disgrace of a human being? Hargrove slowly picked up his radio microphone, his hand trembling violently. Yes, Chief, I am here. You take her off speakerphone right now, you miserable son of a... Lang ordered, his voice cold, quiet, and promising total destruction. Pick up that phone and put it to your ear. We are going to have a very short conversation about the end of your life as a police officer. Hargrove slowly unbuckled his seatbelt. The color had completely vanished from his face, leaving him a sickening shade of ash gray. He looked at Brooks, but the rookie refused to meet his eyes, staring blankly at the windshield, at the ruined trajectory of his own life. Hargrove opened the rear door and picked up the phone. He pressed it to his ear. Chief, Hargrove managed to croak. What Chief Lang said next would not only terminate Hargrove's career before the sun fully rose, but would set in motion a chain of legal consequences that neither officer could ever have comprehended when they decided to bully a woman in a trench coat. The minutes it took for Chief Victor Lang to arrive felt like a suspended eternity. Inside Squad Car 42, the oppressive silence was thick enough to suffocate. Officer Ryan Brooks sat rigidly in the driver's seat, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were bone white. Beside him, Officer Bryce Hargrove stared blankly through the windshield, his chest rising and falling in shallow, erratic gasps. The bravado that had fueled his aggression just minutes prior had entirely evaporated, replaced by the chilling, paralyzing dread of a man watching the foundation of his life crumble into dust. In the back seat, Judge Naomi Whitaker remained perfectly still, the steel cuffs dug relentlessly into her wrists, her shoulders screaming in protest from the awkward angle. But she did not shift. She did not complain. She simply waited, her eyes burning holes into the back of Hargrove's neck. The pre-dawn gloom of the courthouse alleyway was shattered by the strobe-like explosion of red and blue LED lights. An unmarked black Chevrolet Tahoe tore around the corner, its tires screeching against the frost-heaved pavement. It did not park neatly. It angled aggressively, boxing the patrol cruiser in completely. Before the Tahoe had even fully stopped, all 4 doors flew open. Chief Lang, wearing a heavy overcoat hastily thrown over his uniform trousers, stepped out into the freezing wind. He was a mountain of a man, a 30-year veteran of the force who commanded absolute respect. He was not alone. Accompanying him were 2 grim-faced detectives in dark suits, Captain Gregory Hayes and Lieutenant Maria Rostova from the Internal Affairs Bureau. Lang did not walk. He marched toward the cruiser like a guided missile. Hargrove swallowed hard and opened his door, stepping out on trembling legs. Chief, I can explain. Do not speak, Lang roared, his voice echoing off the concrete walls of the courthouse. The absolute fury in his eyes caused Hargrove to physically recoil, stumbling backward against his own door. Do not open your mouth. Do not move. Do not breathe a single word until you are spoken to by Internal Affairs. Give me your keys. Chief, I said give me the keys, Hargrove, Lang shouted, stepping into Hargrove's personal space, towering over him. With shaking hands, Hargrove unclipped the universal handcuff key from his duty belt and handed it over. Lang snatched it away and immediately moved to the rear door of the cruiser. He yanked it open, the harsh interior dome light illuminating Naomi in the back seat. Lang's jaw tightened visibly as he saw the highest-ranking criminal judge in Franklin County shoved into the hard plastic molding of the cage, her hands bound behind her back. Judge Whitaker, I am deeply sorry, Lang said, his voice dropping to a low, tight register of pure mortification. He leaned in, expertly inserting the key into the double-locked mechanism. Click, click. The heavy steel fell away. Naomi brought her arms forward slowly, wincing as blood rushed painfully back into her numb fingers. Deep, angry red indentations circled both of her wrists. She rubbed them meticulously, her face an unreadable mask of stoic endurance. She stepped out of the cramped vehicle, standing tall in the freezing air, smoothing the front of her tailored trench coat. Thank you, Victor, Naomi said, her voice steady and unnervingly calm. She looked past the chief, locking eyes with Hargrove, who was currently being flanked by Captain Hayes and Lieutenant Rostova. I advised your officers that they were violating my Fourth Amendment rights. I advised them of my identity. I offered my official credentials. Officer Hargrove actively discarded my identification, threw my confidential case files onto the pavement, and initiated an unlawful physical assault. Lang closed his eyes for a brief second, absorbing the catastrophic magnitude of the liability. He turned back to the two officers. "Officer Brooks," Lang said sharply. The rookie scrambled out of the car, looking like he was about to faint. "Did you witness Officer Hargrove discard Judge Whitaker's identification?" Brooks looked at his training officer. Hargrove shot him a desperate, pleading glare, a silent demand to adhere to the thin blue line, but Brooks was looking at the chief, the internal affairs detectives, and the sitting superior court judge. The line had already been obliterated. "Yes, sir," Brooks stammered, his voice breaking. "She told us the badge was in her pocket." Officer Hargrove took her wallet out, looked at her gold shield, called it a fake, and tossed it on the hood. Then he cuffed her. "You little rat," Hargrove hissed, stepping toward Brooks. "Hey, step back," Captain Hayes barked, putting a heavy hand squarely in the center of Hargrove's chest and shoving him backward. "She was trespassing," Hargrove shouted, desperation finally breaking his silence. "It is a secure lot. She would not cooperate. I am calling my union rep. I know my Garrity rights. I want William Carver down here right now." Lieutenant Rostova pulled a smartphone from her pocket, dialed a number, and put it on speakerphone, holding it up in the cold air. The phone rang twice. "Carver?" a gruff voice answered. It was William Carver, the powerful head of the local fraternal order of police. "Bill, it is Maria Rostova, IOB. I have Officer Bryce Hargrove here requesting representation," Rostova said flatly. "We are currently standing in the restricted judge's lot behind the Superior Courthouse." "All right, what is the charge?" Carver asked, sounding bored. "Use of force, disrespect to a commanding officer, false arrest, unlawful detainment, assault under the color of authority, and official misconduct," Rostova listed. "He physically assaulted and handcuffed Judge Naomi Whitaker on her way to chambers." The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. It stretched for 10 seconds. "Bill?" Rostova prompted. "I am sending a rep for that," Carver finally said, his voice completely devoid of its usual aggressive bluster. "The union provides legal defense for officers acting within the scope of their duties. Willfully ignoring a superior court judge's gold shield and putting her in irons is so far outside the scope of duty, it is in another solar system. We are not touching this. Hargrove is on his own." Click. The line went dead. The color drained entirely from Hargrove's face. The safety net he had relied on for 12 years of bullying suspects, bending rules, and hiding behind the shield was gone. "Officer Hargrove, Officer Brooks," Chief Lang said, his voice cold and precise, "you are hereby stripped of your police powers, effective immediately. Surrender your weapons, your badges, and your department-issued radios. You are being placed on unpaid administrative leave pending a full criminal investigation. Captain Hayes, read them their Miranda rights. They are not going home. They are going to an interrogation room." The Franklin County Courthouse opened its heavy bronze doors to the public later that morning. Inside, the building was a sprawling hive of activity, lawyers adjusting their ties, clerks pushing heavy carts of dockets, and defendants sitting nervously on wooden benches. Up on the 5th floor, in the quiet mahogany-paneled sanctuary of her chambers, Judge Naomi Whitaker sat at her massive oak desk. Her clerk, a sharp-eyed young woman named Sarah Jenkins, placed a steaming cup of Earl Grey tea on a coaster next to the towering stack of RICO case files. The files had been carefully gathered from the frozen pavement by Chief Lang himself. Sarah's eyes flicked to Naomi's wrists, which were exposed as the judge pushed back her sleeves to type on her computer. The bruising had bloomed into an ugly mottled purple. "Judge," Sarah said softly, hesitating, "I heard a rumor downstairs about the rear lot. Do we need to request a continuance for the syndicate trial? I can call the district attorney and the defense counsel right now. No one would question it." "Absolutely not, Sarah." Naomi looked up from her screen, her eyes sharp and clear. "The men sitting in the holding cells waiting for this trial are accused of running a violent criminal enterprise. My personal inconvenience is not going to delay justice. We proceed at the scheduled time." But the wheels of a different kind of justice were already spinning wildly out of control across the street at the district attorney's office. District Attorney Clayton Voss was a political animal with a ruthless reputation for protecting convictions. When his phone rang with Chief Lang on the other end explaining what had happened in the courthouse parking lot, Voss had nearly thrown his coffee mug through a window. The immediate crisis was not just the sheer stupidity of the assault, it was the legal fallout. Hargrove was a 12-year veteran. He had been the arresting officer or primary witness in hundreds of criminal cases. If it was proven in court that Hargrove harbored explicit racial biases and a willingness to falsify reports, evidenced by his claim that a real judicial badge was fake to justify an arrest, every single defense attorney in the state was going to file appeals to have their clients' convictions overturned. Hargrove had not just ended his own career. He had potentially detonated a bomb in the middle of the DA's archives. Voss marched directly to the IAB holding cells at police headquarters. Hargrove was sitting in a windowless room entirely stripped of his authority. He was wearing an Orange County issue jumpsuit. His badge and gun replaced by paper slippers. He was staring at the metal table, his mind desperately trying to construct a narrative of qualified immunity. I made a mistake in the heat of the moment. It was dark. I thought she was a threat. That was the standard defense. It had worked a dozen times before for other cops. The heavy metal door banged open. Voss walked in, followed closely by Captain Hayes and an unfamiliar man in a sharp federal suit. "Bryce Hargrove," Voss said, not taking a seat. He loomed over the table. "You have requested a public defender, and he is on his way. But before he gets here to negotiate a plea deal that I will absolutely reject, I want to make sure you understand exactly what you have done." "It was a mistake," Hargrove muttered, looking at the table. "I have qualified immunity. I was acting in good faith." Voss let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "Good faith? We have the dashcam footage, Hargrove. We have the body cam audio. You explicitly stated the badge was fake without verifying it. You willfully ignored her identity to satisfy your own ego. Qualified immunity protects officers who make reasonable mistakes regarding established law. There is no universe where detaining a judge who has identified herself as legally reasonable. You pierced the veil of your own immunity the second you threw her wallet on the hood." The man in the suit stepped forward, placing a sleek leather folder on the metal table. "Mr. Hargrove, I am Special Agent Marcus Kessler with the Federal Bureau of Investigation Civil Rights Division. Due to the egregious nature of your actions against a sitting judicial officer, this is no longer just a local matter." Hargrove looked up, genuine terror finally breaking through his stubborn denial. "The FBI? Title 18 United States Code, Section 242, Kessler recited, his voice devoid of any emotion. "Deprivation of rights under color of law. You used your badge to willfully deprive an American citizen of their constitutional rights against unreasonable search and seizure, and you used excessive force to do so. Because a weapon was present on your hip during the commission of this felony, it carries a maximum penalty of 10 years in a federal penitentiary." Hargrove's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The air seemed to be sucked entirely from the small interrogation room. "And that is just the federal side," Voss added, leaning in closer, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "I am personally filing state charges against you: aggravated assault, false imprisonment, official oppression, and tampering with governmental records. You could act like a tyrant in the dark, Bryce, but you picked the wrong woman in the wrong parking lot on the wrong day." Meanwhile, in an adjacent interrogation room, Rookie Officer Ryan Brooks was sobbing into his hands. His public defender sat beside him reviewing a printed document. "Listen to me, Ryan," the defender said quietly. "They want Hargrove. He is the veteran. He is the bad apple. He initiated the physical contact. The DA is offering you a deal. If you testify fully and truthfully against Hargrove in both the state trial and the federal civil rights investigation, they will drop the felony false imprisonment charges against you." Brooks wiped his eyes, his chest heaving. Will I keep my badge?" The lawyer looked at him with a mixture of pity and finality. "No, Ryan. You are never going to be a cop again. You are going to plead guilty to a single misdemeanor count of official misconduct, and you will surrender your post-certification forever. But you will not go to prison. Hargrove is going to prison. Take the deal." By later that day, the story had broken. Someone inside the department had leaked the dashcam footage to a local news syndicate. The video of the arrogant, aggressive officer throwing Judge Naomi Whitaker's case files onto the ground and slamming her against the cruiser played on a loop across every major television network in the country. The hard karma was instantaneous and absolute. As Naomi sat in her courtroom expertly navigating the complex legal arguments of the RICO trial with her usual unmatched brilliance, the men who had assaulted her were being frog-marched in handcuffs through the booking area of the very county jail they had filled for over a decade. Within days, the dashcam footage from Squad Car 42 was not just a local news item, it was a national inferno. The video was dissected on primetime cable news panels, analyzed by legal experts, and shared millions of times across every social media platform. The sheer audacity of the act, two white police officers physically subduing and arresting a prominent black female judge in her own restricted parking lot, ignited a firestorm of public outrage. Protesters gathered on the steps of the Franklin County Courthouse, but they were not protesting the justice system. They were rallying in support of Judge Naomi Whitaker. Signs bearing slogans like "Respect the bench" and "No one is above the law" filled the plaza. For Bryce Hargrove, sitting in a segregated cell at the county detention center, the nightmare was compounding by the hour. His initial bail had been set high. Under normal circumstances, a police union bondsman would have secured his release within an hour, but the Fraternal Order of Police had publicly washed their hands of him. William Carver, the union boss, issued a terse press release stating that the FOP vehemently condemns the actions depicted in the video, which do not reflect the values or training of the Columbus Police Department. Without the union, Hargrove had to rely on his own assets. He called his wife Brenda, begging her to leverage the equity in their suburban home to pay a commercial bondsman. Brenda did not answer the phone. Instead, days later, a process server arrived at the jail and handed Hargrove a thick manila envelope. Inside were divorce papers, a request for a restraining order to protect their assets, and a notice that she had hired Harrison Gable, one of the most aggressive and expensive family law attorneys in Ohio. The public humiliation, combined with the absolute certainty of his impending incarceration and financial ruin, had broken their marriage overnight. Hargrove was entirely, profoundly alone. But the most devastating blow was yet to come. The viral nature of the video reached the living room of a man named Jamal Thorpe. 3 years prior, Jamal, a young black architect, had been pulled over by Officer Hargrove for a minor broken taillight infraction. The stop had escalated aggressively. Hargrove had claimed to smell narcotics, searched Jamal's vehicle without consent, and miraculously found a plastic baggie containing an illegal substance under the passenger seat. Jamal had lost his architectural license, his job, and 18 months of his life to a state penitentiary, all while vehemently maintaining his innocence. Watching the broadcast, Jamal saw the exact same arrogant smirk on Hargrove's face, the same brutal dismissal of authority and truth. Jamal immediately contacted a prominent civil rights attorney, a fierce litigator named Arthur Prendergast. Prendergast filed a massive federal lawsuit, but he did not stop there. He subpoenaed the GPS tracking data of Squad Car 42 from the night of Jamal's arrest, cross-referencing it with Hargrove's body cam footage, which had conveniently malfunctioned during the search of Jamal's car. Prendergast hired an independent forensic audio analyst who managed to recover a corrupted buffered audio file from the camera's internal drive. The audio captured Hargrove whispering to a former partner, "Just toss the baggie under the seat, we need the caller for the monthly quota." When DA Voss received the recovered audio from Prendergast, the structural integrity of the Columbus Police Department's archives completely collapsed. Hargrove had not just made a terrible mistake with Judge Whitaker, he was a systemic cancer. Voss held a televised press conference the following week. He looked grim standing behind a podium bristling with microphones. "Effective immediately," Voss announced, his voice echoing through the plaza. "My office is forming an independent conviction integrity unit. We are placing a stay on over 140 active cases where Bryce Hargrove was the primary arresting officer or key witness. Furthermore, we are initiating the process of vacating the convictions of 32 individuals, including Mr. Jamal Thorpe, based on uncovered evidence of evidence tampering and perjury committed by former Officer Hargrove." The fallout was apocalyptic for the disgraced cop. The state added 32 counts of perjury, evidence tampering, and official misconduct to his already staggering list of indictments. The federal government amended their civil rights charges, elevating the case from a single incident of deprivation of rights to a pattern and practice of constitutional violations. Hargrove was no longer just facing a ruined career, he was looking at the rest of his natural life behind bars. Months later, the federal courtroom in downtown Columbus was packed to absolute capacity. The air was thick with anticipation. The mahogany benches were filled with journalists, legal scholars, and dozens of people whose lives had been derailed by Bryce Hargrove over his 12-year career. Jamal Thorpe sat in the second row wearing a sharp, custom-tailored suit, his architectural license newly restored. At the defense table sat Bryce Hargrove. The physical transformation was shocking. The broad-shouldered, intimidating bully had withered. He had lost weight in county lockup. His hair was thinning, his skin held a sickly, pallid gray hue, and his eyes were hollow, darting nervously around the room. He wore a faded standard-issue olive-drab jumpsuit, his wrists and ankles shackled with heavy chains. He had pled guilty. There was no other option. The mountain of evidence, the dash cam, the audio tapes, the testimony of rookie Ryan Brooks, who had taken his misdemeanor plea and was now working a quiet, anonymous job in warehouse logistics, made a trial practically suicidal. Today was the sentencing hearing. The presiding judge was the Honorable William Davis, a federal jurist known for his sharp intellect and zero tolerance for police corruption. "Before I pass sentence," Judge Davis announced, his deep voice commanding total silence in the vast room, "the court will hear a victim impact statement. The prosecution calls Judge Naomi Whitaker." A murmur rippled through the gallery. The heavy wooden doors at the back of the courtroom opened and Naomi Whitaker walked down the center aisle. She was not wearing her judicial robes today. She wore a striking, immaculate crimson blazer over a black dress. Her posture was perfect, her chin held high. She radiated an aura of absolute, unbreakable strength. She stepped up to the podium, adjusting the microphone. She did not look at the jury box. She did not look at the gallery. She turned her head and locked her piercing gaze directly onto Bryce Hargrove. Hargrove physically flinched, dropping his eyes to the table. He could not look at her. "Mr. Hargrove," Naomi began, her voice crisp, steady, and carrying effortlessly through the silent room. "Look at me." Hargrove hesitated, his hands trembling in his lap. Slowly, agonizingly, he raised his head. "When you stopped me in the parking lot of my own courthouse," Naomi said, her tone devoid of anger, entirely clinical, "you did not see a judge, you did not see a lawyer or a citizen or even a human being worthy of basic dignity. You saw a target, you saw an opportunity to exercise petty, unearned tyranny. You assumed, because of your own deep-seated ignorance, that my success was a fraud, and your authority was absolute." She paused, letting the silence hang in the air like a blade. "But you fundamentally misunderstood what power actually is. Power is not a badge. It is not a gun, and it is certainly not the ability to force a woman against the hood of a car in the dark. Power is the law. Power is the truth. I told you that morning that you were destroying your own life, and you laughed at me. You are not laughing today." Naomi gripped the edges of the podium. I am not standing here seeking revenge. The justice system does not deal in revenge, it deals in consequence. Your actions on that morning exposed a rot that had infected hundreds of cases and ruined innocent lives. In your attempt to humiliate me, you triggered your own absolute destruction. I ask the court to impose the maximum penalty allowable by law, not just for what you did to me, but for every person you abused when there were no cameras rolling. Naomi stepped down from the podium and walked back down the aisle, her heels clicking rhythmically against the hardwood floor. Judge Davis adjusted his glasses, looking down at the broken man at the defense table. "Bryce Hargrove," Davis said, his voice echoing with absolute finality, "you were entrusted with a badge and a gun to protect the citizens of this state. Instead, you weaponized that trust to feed your own prejudices and your own ego. You are a disgrace to the uniform and a danger to the very foundation of civil liberty." Davis picked up his wooden gavel. "On the federal charges of deprivation of civil rights, I sentence you to 120 months in federal prison. On the state charges of perjury, evidence tampering, and aggravated assault, I sentence you to an additional 240 months to be served consecutively. You will serve no less than 25 years before you are eligible for parole." Bang! The sound of the gavel striking the sound block echoed like a gunshot. Two federal marshals stepped forward, hauling Hargrove to his feet by his armpits. His knees buckled under the weight of the sentence. 30 years. He would be an old, broken man before he ever saw the outside of a prison wall again. As he was dragged through the side door of the courtroom, the chains around his ankles rattling loudly against the floor, he caught one final glimpse of the gallery. No one was crying for him. No one was protesting. There was only the cold, hard, unyielding reality of karma executed perfectly by the very system he had tried to subvert. Across the street, in the Franklin County Courthouse, Judge Naomi Whitaker stepped into her chambers. She slipped her black robe over her shoulders, smoothed the fabric, and picked up her own gavel. The docket was full, the law was waiting, and there was work to be done. The story of Judge Naomi Whitaker is a chilling reminder that arrogance and prejudice are the ultimate architects of their own downfall. Bryce Hargrove thought his badge was a shield that granted him absolute immunity to act as a tyrant in the shadows. He learned the hard way that true power does not come from intimidation. It comes from an unwavering commitment to the truth and the law. When karma finally arrived, it did not just strip him of his career, it unraveled his entire life, brought justice to dozens of his past victims, and locked him away for decades. If this story of absolute, undeniable justice served cold gave you chills, make sure to hit that like button. Share this incredible real-life lesson with your friends to remind them that no one is above the law, and do not forget to subscribe for more dramatic, jaw-dropping stories where karma always gets the last word.